Good morning. Good morning. Happy Friday, August 2nd. Let's have a quick little discussion before we get into our contracts.
You'll have to, you got to enable a
Hold on.
co-host for
Gotcha.
both the live video.
Got it. Got it. Okay, you guys are enabled. There's a tropical wave entering the center of Cuba. It's going to run at Cuba, enter into the Gulf, and probably strengthen again. So we're going to have a very rainy weekend. And it's just incumbent upon us to call our sellers and say, hey, do me a favor, take your sign panel off because we don't flying around hitting somebody, or killing somebody, or maiming a house. And if you have any vacant listings, you probably have to take those sign panels down yourself. So keep an eye on the weather this weekend. Is basically what I'm saying. I wouldn't worry too much about it personally, because I think it's going to really get destroyed when it comes over Cuba. But you never know what can happen. It could just stop and stall and gain strength. So it is what it is. And it is that time of year. So there we go. Wow, I'm honored. We had a lawyer, a contract master, and a broker talking about the changes. Are you guys feeling pretty comfortable? I think everybody is that I'm talking to. We're getting it. We've talked about it. Today, we're not going to teach a listing agreement. We're going to teach the changes to the listing agreement because you already pretty much know the listing agreement, right? So I've got the red line pulled up, and then Angelique sent me one that's in .loop that has all the pre-printed terms. So we're going to look at both of those today. So you're totally comfortable and convenient. But before we do that, let's talk about what you have to do by next Thursday. Anybody want to jump in and remind them?
Make sure you get with your sellers and get those forms over to them. Make sure you have a conversation with them. Make sure that they have an opportunity to hear why we're doing it and how easy it really is. It's just all about transparency.
It is. And there's some really good resources for you to use and give the seller. I wouldn't try to explain the settlement to them. Tell them to go to fax.realtor.org or fax.realtor, period.
Right.
Fax.
Yeah.
So we're going to send a, what's it called? Commission acknowledgement, right? So the seller is going to sign a form, and the form we're going to use for our current listing agreement is buyer broker to pay seller broker. And we're going to put a percentage in that mirrors what our current listing agreement says. And it's also going to put in the line that commissions are negotiable and not set by law. So that's the one form, right? And the other one is, that is that second one. The one is the commission exception, buyer broker to seller broker, and the other one is called the.
They're both compensation agreements. So we have the two compensation agreements and the other one is just a disclosure. It's literally all it is.
That's right, disclosure. But that has to be given to our seller. So those two forms need to be done. All right, let's jump in. Share my screen. Share screen. Put this one. Not that one, this one. Okay, here we go. Move these things around. Kat, what's the purpose of changing broker to brokerage?
The purpose of changing broker to broker is to give the proper notice that we need of what we're doing, how we're doing it, and percentages paid.
No, I mean, on the first red word, brokerage. Because a lot of people ask me to sign as the broker. I'm not your broker. The brokerage is Century 21 Beggins Enterprises.
Correct.
I'm the qualifying broker for Beggins Enterprises. The broker is Century 21 List with Beggins. I'm the qualifying broker for List with Beggins. The brokerage is Century 21 BE3, and Jeff is the qualifying broker for BE3. So your broker is the brokerage, not the person. So that's why they did that. Okay. Any changes to paragraph 1? Nope.
Nope.
Paragraph 2? Nope. Scared still? Nope.
And getting back to number 1, the reason why we have that is because we're not signing in our individual capacity. We're signing in the capacity of the structure of the corporation or whatever the organization may be.
Yeah. And we give the agent the authority to sign. If I signed it, I'd signed it Craig Beggins broker. Broker for the brokerage, right?
Right.
Just like we have a customer buying in an LLC, they'll sign as Chris Reed, managing member. right?
Right.
Or trustee. Okay, changes in paragraph 3.
See, that's where your changes are.
Yeah. How do we know? Because this is redlined. If it wasn't redlined, you wouldn't even notice it.
It's Friday. Come on, man.
So you handle C. Yeah. What's the change?
Yep. See, the change is they struck out or, they made it mortgage.
Just read it
discount.
without the red line, without the crossouts. So seller will pay mortgage discount.
Can you blow that up a little bigger? Because my eyes are like bugging. Thank you. Oh, there you go. Seller will pay mortgage discount or other closing costs or concessions not to exceed the dollar amount that's put in there, or any other expenses seller agrees to pay in connection with the transaction.
Okay. So they took out or because they added something else,
Correct.
right? Or goes before the last part of the sentence.
Right, the
To
concession.
exceed, they just
Mhm.
put a dollar amount.
Correct.
Now, they took out percentage. Chris, why do you think they took out percentage? Because we talked about this the other day.
So as not to confuse compensation and concessions. And you can see they added the word concessions just to clarify that closing costs, concessions, discount points, they can all be construed as something the seller is allowed to offer to a buyer. Remove the percentage so that we don't confuse percentages with compensation that the buyer's agent could receive. And this is why, when we're talking about the change to the MLS allowing us to add concessions, and it allows for a dollar amount or a percentage, we just want to be careful with what we offer because we don't want to confuse what our listing agreement says and what the MLS says and what a buyer's agent might think. So that's why there's a lot of extra like little details that we're really just paying attention to make sure that we show up best.
Yes. I love the red line portion because it really makes it easy to see what the changes are. This change is, so it would say seller will pay mortgage discount or other closing costs or concessions not to exceed $10,000 and any other expenses seller agrees to pay in connection with the transaction. So just because he's offering 10, does that mean you can't ask for 12?
Nope, you can ask for whatever you want.
Yep.
This agreement just says that I am authorizing you to list my property and sell it at this price. And at that price, I would consider these concessions up to this amount. And if you bring me an offer of a buyer ready, willing, and able, then we have fulfilled our duties as the listing brokerage.
Correct. Now, we had a lot of confusion around this the other day with some pretty experienced agents saying, but if the seller says they'll pay 3% and we tell the other broker they're going to pay 3% and then we lower the price, well, let's put it on here because we're going to pay 3% for how many days?
30
week,
days
a
in the compensation agreement, it says 30 days.
30 days to flip blank.
Yes.
So 15 days after we sign that form, we lower the price from 400 to 375. And the seller also decides to lower the commission since he lowered the price, which is not a good idea, but let's say he did. What happens to the 3% offer compensation? The 3% offer compensation was offered when the price was 400,000.
Right.
Now the price is 275. So probably a good idea for the listing agent to call that buyer's agent and say, hey, there's been a change. We've lowered the price and we've lowered the commission. And here's a new commission agreement. Because clarity is what we're after.
Correct.
Pain in the ass?
That's
Yes.
the question. The form doesn't say if you lower the price, this form becomes invalid.
Right. But we could
So-
rescind the old one and replace it with.
Correct. But
Yeah.
and that's why we say we understand that confusion, but just think about it like this. When you lower the price, does the commission change in the MLS typically?
No, almost never.
No. And it's that offer of compensation is always out there. It's always out there at 3%, 2.5%, whatever that is. When you
Right.
lower the price, all you do is we know we are offering that compensation, so we negotiate the price of the home accordingly.
Right.
Yep.
The seller, what was I just going to say? Yeah, we're already lowering our commission when we lower the price. Because 3% of 400 is more than 3% of 275.
Yep.
So we're already lowering our commission, so that's why we don't do it. All right, paragraph 4, any changes in paragraph 4?
You'll see right after the word property, I'll read the whole thing. Broker agrees to make diligent and continued efforts to sell the property in accordance with this agreement until a sales contract is pending on the property. This includes, except when not in seller's best interest, cooperating and communication with other brokers, communicating, and making the property available for showings. So we're gonna be going by our seller's direction on the availability of showings
Mhm.
and continued in cooperation and communicating with other brokers.
When would it not be in the seller's best interest to allow showings when they're under contract? I can't think of a good reason.
Not unless you've got a 5-day closing coming on a cash
Yeah,
deal.
Don't waste my time type of
And you don't
thing.
want to tick off the buyer and they find out that you're showing properties, cautiously on things like that. If they happen to walk in or have an open house and you're already under contract.
I could possibly think if you made the listing contingent on pre-approval or proof of funds prior to a showing, and somebody gives us the proof of funds or pre-approval that doesn't match what we're asking, then possibly it's not in the seller's best interest for a buyer to look at the property when they can't afford it or haven't provided documentation they could.
That's
And
a good
now
idea.
they're also notified us they'd be asking us for a compensation agreement and concessions, and they already can't afford it. That might be a scenario where it might not be in the seller's best interest.
Mhm.
Yep.
Okay, I gotta look at this real quick. They struck out the number 5, but it's in order, so I don't know why they did that. We'll check the real form in a second. Seller's initials, broker, or authorized associate. Acknowledge receipt of this copy. So you guys can just sign that for me. And the seller has to initial these places here. The parties acknowledge. Okay, let's say it's paragraph 5. Placing the property in a multiple listing service, the MLS, is beneficial to the seller because the property will be exposed to a large number of potential buyers. As an MLS, how is that?
So
Let's just
if
talk about
your co-brokes are gonna be bringing an offer, so.
Yeah. I don't want to get into a fight with the seller and say, I don't even want it on MLS. You're not offering compensation, don't even put it on. That just ties our hands behind our back, It's beneficial to sell because the property exposed to a large number of potential buyers because buyers are on MLS searches by the thousands right now. They're not leaving. Buyers are still going to be on the searches and they never saw the commission anyway. As an MLS participant, broker is obligated to enter the property into the MLS within 1 business day of marketing the property to the public. That law has not changed. Clear cooperation policy. Or as necessary to comply with local MLS rules. The listing will be published according to the MLS unless seller directs broker otherwise in writing. See paragraph 6B1. Seller authorizes broker to report to the MLS this listing information and price and terms and financing information on any resulting sale for use by an authorized board, association member, and MLS participant, and subscriber unless seller directs broker otherwise not to. So what is MLS really? It's a data collection field that is provided to the state so they can predict housing trends. Right. So we have to share information. So this gives us permission to share unless a seller tells us not to. You're going to see a lot more of that coming down with text messaging. I've been reading about. You have to get an express written consent to text people automatically. Right. So there's more of that consumer protection stuff going on right now. Okay. And then it added, the parties acknowledge this form should not be used to share offers of compensation to buyer brokers or other buyer representatives via any field in the MLS. This couldn't be more important. They're not messing around.
No.
So don't even try. I got a cute little joke here from Joe. Where's that?
For the lockbox?
Yeah. No.
Yeah, for the lockbox.
So you
Yeah.
put the key in the lockbox and put the commission on the key. That's okay to do, by the way. But it's no guarantee of compensation. If I were the agent, I want the listing broker or the seller to sign a form saying they're paying me. But that's just a cute way, like Chris said, putting a sign rider, buyer compensation offered.
I like the writer.
That was kind of cute. I thought it was kind of funny. Okay, where am I? All right. Do not copy. Paragraph 6. Any changes? Nope.
Nope.
Paragraph 7. Nope. One change.
There's one change there, use of a lockbox or the existence of, wait a minute, of undisclosed material facts about the property?
you're indemnifying the broker and holding the broker
Got
harmless.
it.
Somebody, breaks in because of the lockbox. It's not my fault. It's a super
Right,
lockbox.
right. They struck out the arbitration clause that was in there originally.
Yeah, well, they did because going forward, a court or arbitration decision that a broker who was not compensated in connection with the transaction is entitled to compensation from the broker. That's going away because now there's a buyer broker agreement on every buyer.
Right.
So the buyer is going to be responsible for paying their agent. Okay. So that's pretty not scary.
No.
And they put this again at the bottom. The parties acknowledge this form should not be used to share offers of compensation for buyer brokers or other representatives. I love the nuances, how these guys get into this stuff. Compensation, Chris, you want to cover compensation?
Yes, seller will compensate broker as specified below if a buyer is procured who is ready, willing, and able to purchase the property or any interest in the property on the terms of this agreement or any other terms acceptable to seller. Seller will pay broker as follows. So they
Okay,
just said,
but before you go in that, you and I talked yesterday. There's a real slippery nuance here.
well, before we get to the dollars and stuff, the quick little change up top was just, you're gonna pay me for procuring, but this is an exclusive right of sale listing agreement that says anybody that's procured, we would still be compensated. So that was just a little wordsmith thing. They just moved it around. Instead of for procuring, they're just saying if a buyer becomes procured, you will compensate us. So it's just a clarification that says it's an exclusive right of sale listing agreement. If a buyer is procured, we will be compensated. So there's no discrepancies there. And
Just
that
as an aside, I was with the owner of Century 21 of Latin America and 9 countries in Europe yesterday.
Hmm.
And they're opening up Brazil now. And they were talking to us about some of the things we're doing, which is an honor. And so I was asking how the real estate market is there, because Brazil is huge. I don't know if you know, it's 220 million people. And we're 330 million people. So it's a pretty damn big country.
Mhm.
But their real estate is unorganized. There's no real estate commission. There's no NAR. There's no state associations. There are local boards, but they're voluntary, not, okay? There's no MLS. And they don't use exclusive right of sale listing agreements. So I can list, hey, Chris, here's a listing. You can sell my house. Kat, you can sell my house. And somebody else can sell my house. Kat puts it on her website. Chris puts it on his website. Somebody else puts it on their website. Chris could spend more money and put it someplace else if he wants to. Doesn't have to. But whoever brings the buyer gets paid and everybody else doesn't get anything.
Yep.
Is that backwards or what?
Italy does that. France does that. Santo Domingo, the Dominican Republic does that. It's a little insane.
Yeah. So we take it for granted to have the
exclusive right to sell and be compensated for the work
Yeah.
that's put out there.
it's organized real estate. And they're all afraid to try to switch because they don't have any value to bring. There's no MLS to share. But they all say they will share a commission if you bring them a buyer. But why would you bring them a buyer? Just go get your listing yourself. It just it makes
Right.
sense. All right, let's keep on, Chris. No changes in A, B, C, or D.
Correct. And retained deposits, it used to be 50% if left blank, they've removed that. So, but we still have the right to be entitled to receive a percentage of all deposits. They just removed the if left blank number.
I may have asked Angelique to fill it in for you. I'll show you in a minute.
And then the next one is added F, brokerage commissions are not set by law and are fully negotiable. One of the required verbiages that is to be on basically anything that mentions compensation in any way.
Yeah. And they are fully negotiable, and our firm charges 3% plus $325,
Mhm.
right? So that doesn't change. Okay.
Number 9 is just the notice to the seller regarding buyers brokers. This is just informing them of trying to clarify the scenario that there's going to be buyers brokers and buyers and people coming. So basically, let's just go through it. Regarding buyers brokers, the buyers broker, even if compensated by you or us, the brokerage, will provide services for the buyer. Seller is advised and is aware that seller may, but is not required to, compensate a buyer's broker upon closing. Seller may choose to enter into a separate written agreement to pay buyer's broker or may approve broker to pay buyer's broker in accordance with paragraph 10 below. Seller also understands. So this just clarifies, you can pay them, Mr. Seller. You can give me all of the money and authorize me to pay them, but you're not required to pay anybody. That's just wanting to clarify.
But it's in your best interest. I like those words.
A, buyer's broker may include this broker if broker also works with buyer on this transaction, meaning I, as the listing brokerage, may also bring a buyer to you, and we may include them in, that may include me. I may be the buyer's broker. If this occurs during the duration of this listing, broker will be entitled to the compensation in paragraph 8 for services performed for the seller, as well as the buyer's broker compensation in paragraph 10 for services performed by the buyer or for the buyer. The seller should therefore take this into consideration when negotiating compensation. That basically clarifies, if I am the buyer's broker as well as the listing broker, I am entitled to the compensation above in paragraph 8, and also whatever the buyer's broker was being offered below in paragraph 10, which we'll get to in a second. I'm entitled to all of that compensation based on the agreement that we have just construed.
Because you're doing both jobs.
Correct.
Right, right.
C, broker may receive separate compensation from buyer for services rendered to buyer by broker. So this basically says I can get paid by the buyer as well. So you can't get mad at me if you're paying me 3%. You also offered the buyer's broker 2%, and my buyer decided that they were going to pay me a total of 4%. So I make an additional 2 from them. You can't say, well, I'm not paying you the 2% for the buyer's broker because the buyer's already paying you something. That's not what you're not allowed to do that as the seller. It's letting you know that I have the ability and can be compensated by the buyer as well. And I'm just notifying you of such.
And
Wow,
it's
that'd be
great
kind of cool.
transparency. I really love that paragraph because it's transparency, and we won't be getting investors trying to nail us to shave off this amount of money or shave off that amount of money at the closing table. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten phone calls from agents who have repeat investors who try to pull that stunt. And I don't ever approve it. It's not going to happen. And this is transparency because we have the right to negotiate it up front.
Yep.
On that note, number 10,
Oh,
really.
wait, hold on one second, because remember up top, they changed it from broker to brokerage?
Yes.
Why did they change it to brokerage throughout the whole document? Like C, brokerage may receive a separate compensation from buyer for services rendered by buyer by brokerage.
It's the entity.
If it's Craig Beckins as the broker, I may receive separate commission. That's the
Hey,
argument, right?
Well, they also changed the word to consumer on the buyer broker agreement, but left it buyer broker agreement instead of consumer broker
Exactly.
agreement.
I saw that. That is, yeah, they got some wordsmith work to do there.
Okay, so guys, this is the meat, right? The meat of the changes are these paragraphs right here. It's cooperating brokers and compensation to buyer brokers. Go ahead, Kat.
Yeah, sure. Compensation to buyer brokers. Brokerage commissions are not set by law and are fully negotiable. We've been talking about this for weeks and
It's
weeks.
on the bottom of every page.
Yeah, it is. It truly is. It's all about transparency. Seller approves the following. Check all that apply. If no option is checked, then option C is deemed to be selected. A, seller authorizes broker to compensation to buyer's broker in the amount of percentage, purchase price, or a dollar amount. This amount will be paid from broker to buyer's broker from the compensation amount agreed to in paragraph 8. This compensation will be set forth in a separate written agreement between the broker and buyer's broker. So that's the first piece.
Okay, and that's the one form that is listing brokerage to pay buying brokerage.
Right.
That's the one we're going to use with our current in-place listings now. So what do we write in that blank line?
Percentage.
You got to be careful here because the seller's going to authorize this. This is what the seller's authorizing us to do. And
Right.
it comes from our listing agreement. And our
Right.
listing agreement says 345, 345. So make sure you put the correct number in there,
Yeah.
right? But we also have a transaction fee
Correct.
or an MLS fee that we deduct from the buyer broker.
Except
And
Manatee and Sarasota doesn't.
yeah, if your market does that, you're going to put in 3% minus 325 or
Mhm.
2.5% minus 325. We're going to do that for a while. If the other brokers stop doing it, we'll stop doing it. Right? Because I really don't want to do that, but we gotta protect ourselves because if they're going to ding us, then we want to ding them back.
Well,
Okay.
cost of doing business. We have the overhead. These fees are important.
So to be clear, before we go to B, A
Yep.
is the one you're going to Okay, no. A, we don't want to check going forward. So any listings after the 16th or after the 6th, when you're taking new listings, don't check A. Because what does that mean? Brokers paying buyer's broker. So what if the seller screws up and doesn't pay us enough money? Who made the promise to pay the buyer broker?
The brokerage did.
The brokerage did.
Right.
So if we don't pay, they don't get paid, who are they gonna sue? The
They're
broker.
gonna s- They're gonna,
Yeah.
the buyer's broker's gonna sue us, and then we're gonna have to sue our seller. Because the seller agreed to pay us X and we agreed to offer X to the buyer's broker. If there's any discrepancies, we get sued and we have to go back and sue the seller.
Which we don't want to do.
And we don't want, with all of the whole thing with this whole lawsuit was about collusion and buyer's broker steering this, that, seller's broker steering. So if we remove ourselves from collecting the buyer broker compensation and use B, which is Kat will talk about next, we're going to be the seller is the one that's offering the compensation directly. And we are no longer in the middle of having to collect and be responsible.
And then go back to your buyer broker knowledge, because what does the buyer broker say about money that the seller pays the buyer? Any money that we get on behalf of the seller gets credited to what the buyer has to pay us. So I said that wrong. So in paragraph A, the way our current listings are, that's what's going to happen. We're going to pay that. And then because I'm sorry, the buyer is still going to pay us. But if the seller gives us the money to pay the buyer, then we have to credit it to the buyer, and then the buyer will pay us. So the closing statement is going to have a buyer column and a seller column. The seller's going to pay the listing commission, and the buyer's going to pay the buyer commission.
Right.
So we're going to credit our commission to the buyer because the buyer broker agreement says we will. Okay, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, don't be sorry. You didn't do anything wrong. And I think too, a checklist to go in with this doc would be really, really helpful until people get it up here and have
I'm going
it.
to show you in
presented.
a second.
Sam has been working on like a flow chart too. So we've got a little bit of a flow chart for how to process the buyer brokerage agreements and everything, but we're also working on little flow charts for, is this the case? Yes, go here and this is what you'll need. Is this
Right.
the case? No, go here and this is what you'll need. So we're
Right.
trying to work on that to make it a little more visual so that you can understand which compensation agreement you'll need, depending on what point you're at, what listing agreement you're using, and how that's going to be required.
And that's good to share with everybody. Very good points. B, seller authorizes broker to offer compensation to buyer's broker from seller in the amount of percentage of purchase price or a dollar amount. This compensation will be set forth in a separate written agreement between the seller and buyer's broker. C, no compensation will be offered to buyer's broker.
A, seller authorizes broker to offer compensation to buyer's broker. B, seller authorizes broker to offer compensation to buyer's broker from the seller. That's the difference, from the
Mhm.
seller.
Right there.
Here's the point we have to be careful of. So if our current listing agreement, go back up to section 8, please. If we're not our current, but our listing agreements moving forward, if we use this verbiage, total percent that we are receiving. Let's say as the listing broker, we're collecting 6%.
Mhm.
Which moving forward, that's not what we'll want to do, but let's talk about it as we're
The way the
collecting,
current listing agreement is written,
with the brokerage collects all of the commission and then
Right.
we offer it.
Right.
But moving
Right.
forward, we're gonna want to say, look, seller pays seller's broker, buyer pays buyer's broker. If the seller wants to offer something, that's going to be a separate agreement and you'll check box B down below. So you have to be careful though, because if you put 3% in section 8 here, and say my listing fee is 3%. That's what we charge. And then you scroll down to section 10 and you accidentally check box A because you're not paying attention. And you put in 3% to a buyer's broker, you will receive no compensation.
Well, it wouldn't be because they're not paying attention, it's because they didn't understand the form. That's why it's so important that we're going.
But
over
if they paid attention, they'd read this next section. It says this amount will be paid from broker to buyer's broker from compensation amount agreed to in paragraph A. So you would need to collect enough in paragraph 8 to be able to compensate them from section A in paragraph 10. So
And that's why the flow chart will be so important so that we don't speak out of school
100%.
harshly with it. Again, it's about understanding the form. They could accidentally do the wrong thing. That's why the flow chart is going to be very, very helpful.
100%. So just
If our seller is offering compensation to a buyer's agent, we want the total commission in paragraph 8. So we have enough to honor the seller's pledge in paragraph 10B.
no,
No,
10A. If
10A, I'm sorry.
So what
Right.
we are not gonna do is not, it's what, as a brokerage policy, what we're discussing now and finalizing is we will not be collecting the buyer's broker compensation as part of our total commission. We are going to charge 3% for our listings. That will be in section paragraph 8. We
Right.
collect 3% compensation for the list side plus a 325 transaction fee. Then down below in section 10.
Wait, let me just stop you there because we decided to put 3% plus 325 in this line.
Correct.
And I'll show you that in a second.
So section A will be 3% of total purchase price plus the 325 fee, because there's a blank for that.
right.
And then in section 10, we're gonna check box B. That way the seller authorizes broker to offer compensation to a buyer's broker from the seller. And then we're gonna sign a compensation agreement that says seller will compensate buyer's broker and put in the dollar amount or percentage that they're offering as a separate agreement, because it says this compensation will be set forth in a separate written agreement between seller and buyer's broker.
Which is the form that we're not using with our current listing agreement. The acknowledgement form.
Correct.
There you go.
And Sarah asked a really good question. If the forms could be populated where we have the boxes highlighted that auto-populate.
I'll tell you what, I'll complete one. There's a mock one and send it out to you with everything highlighted where we made the changes.
I think it's a good idea.
Okay, so paragraph 9 has been replaced. Brokerage relationship, no changes. It says we're a transaction broker. They did take out the transaction broker notice though. I'm surprised by that. But I guess it's just been around for so long now they don't care. Parties shouldn't share compensation to buyer brokers or anything by any field in MLS. Boom again.
Well, when you
Paragraph.
really think about it, it could only be transactional from this point forward.
Oh
With
no,
all the changes.
sure we could. You could be a single agent.
You don't want that.
No, we could be though,
Yeah, but you don't.
because they have a
want-
single agent listing agreement. They have a single agent buyer broker agreement. We just chose to use a transaction broker buyer broker agreement and the transaction
Much
broker listing.
better. Yeah, much better.
Conditional termination. I'll show you that in a second. Dispute resolution. We don't want to do arbitration. Here's what I was told by the attorneys. If we do arbitration, everything starts with mediation. Work it
Right.
out amongst yourselves. And then this goes on to say, if you want to arbitrate, you're going to binding arbitration. And then you got to hire an attorney. The seller's got to hire an attorney. The buyer's got to hire an attorney. This attorney wants a $5,000 retainer. This attorney wants a $5,000 retainer. We're fighting over a $5,000 deposit, right? And then those two attorneys are going to hire an arbitration attorney, and they're about $300 an hour.
Yeah.
And the mediation and arbitration is going to take 4 or 5, 6 hours. So there's another $2,000. Now you got $12,000 in legal fees spent to collect 5.
Yep.
But if you don't go to arbitration, you can go straight to civil court,
Mhm.
which I heard was like a $500 fee, and it moves much faster than arbitration.
I think the civil fees are gonna cost you more than that.
Really? That's what the attorney said on the show.
Yeah, just a tad bit more than that, plus your filing fees and all that stuff.
Anyway, but it makes it apparently it's a lot cheaper because these parties doesn't have to.
Mediation's much cheaper.
Much
Mediation,
cheaper.
absolutely hands down, the best way to go.
All right. That's it. Those are the changes.
Are your heads spinning yet?
But
With
let's look at
practice,
this real quick
yeah.
before we go.
Yeah,
So this is the actual final form. Paragraph 1, paragraph 2, paragraph 3, paragraph 4. Notice we pre-checked for you, use the lockbox system, so we don't forget to do that. We pre-checked withhold verbal offers. That's just a little, I like that. Because you can tell the cooperating broker, I don't present verbal offers. You have to present all offers. No, my seller has instructed me not to. And
right.
this is your instruction. And these are always confusing and some people miss them. We do not authorize automated estimates on the market value of the property. Seller does not authorize third parties to write comments or reviews about the listing. Spelled like dog hair, blah, 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 blah. We don't want their comments, right?
Right.
Then this one, and I get a lot of pushback for this from agents that join us from other companies. The listing, this listing agreement says the seller shall make all legally required disclosures, including all facts that materially affect the property value and are not readily observable or known by the buyer. Seller certifies and represents that seller knows of no such material facts, local government building code violations, unobservable defects, etc., other than the following. So what did they do there, Kat? They certified and represented that they know nothing.
That's it.
So what happens if we catch them in a lie?
Mm.
Is that fraud?
You've got different types. It could be omission, it could be fraud, it could be any number of
It
scenarios.
opens you up to a lawsuit.
It does.
So we put in C seller's property disclosure. So we reference a third-party form and we tell the seller to fill out that disclosure because it's covering their butt, right? If the buyer would say, well, you never told me that it was on a well, that material affects the value of the property. Well, it's readily observable, so you get, that's a bad example, but whatever it is. So the seller's disclosure form asks them specific questions to cover their butt, right?
And then
And
they-
the listing agreement,
And subsequently, they sign a contract that says seller has made all known disclosures to the buyer. So if we're going to have to do that as soon as they sign a contract and we are representing that they have made all disclosures already in our listing, we should have all disclosures made, or at least provide them with the documentation to obtain that ability to disclose so that we don't ever get someone come back and say, well, you didn't do that. You didn't do that. I know I signed that, but you didn't tell me anything else. I didn't know I had to. So
Mhm.
that's why our property disclosure is a required form. Even if they end up not signing it, we'll make sure we sign it and say that, well, not sign it, but we'll put the one in that says no disclosure provided by seller. We're stating that we tried and here's the emails that we tried and they refused to do it, even though they've signed a listing agreement and a contract saying that they've made that disclosure.
Yeah.
and they did it, and we know about it, but we
Yep.
didn't tell them. They were forced it. It's our problem.
Yep.
Back
the
to
law-
Latin America for a second. Steve, the guy I was with, was talking about the governor, and they were talking about buyer beware. And they said, why would a seller want to tell the buyer what their problems are? That's just disorganized real estate. It blows my mind they could think like that. All right, let's talk about this one real quick. We've pre-filled in 50% of the consideration paid for an option. Why did we do that?
So we have a number that's set, that's consistent, that everybody understands and that we use.
I like to say because we are obligated to present any offer in writing to the seller. If somebody gives us an option, Kat, I'll option your house. Here's $100,000. I'll pay you $500,000 for your house 6 months from now. Would you consider that?
Depends on the market you're in.
Well, you would consider it.
Sure, possibly.
So we
You
want
wanna
to be
get paid.
protected.
Yeah.
So that's in case you get an offer. But a lot of sellers cross through this. I don't want an option. You don't have to pay. You don't have to take an option. But if you do take one, you pay us.
I tell people, look, my marketing is very robust and it's going to procure many different buyers, tenants, leasers, options, investors, and they are going to present an offer that works for them. Now, I understand you may not want to consider those, but let's say the Queen of England comes and sees your property and says, your property is the best property for me, and I'm willing to pay you $20,000 a month as a lease or $100,000 as an option payment for that property, because that's the only way I'm willing to do that. Would you consider taking $20,000 a month for a lease for your $300,000 property or a $100,000 option for your $300,000 property if she could buy it in 6 months or a year? And I say, yes, you might consider that. I might even kick you in the ass if you don't take $20,000 a month in a lease, because it would be in your best interest from our perspective. So if that's something that my marketing could procure for you, don't you think that I should be compensated if I'm able to benefit you in that manner?
There you go.
So I'll say, well, yeah, I guess I understand that. Because if my marketing procures an offer that you would take because it benefits you, should I be compensated for bringing that to you?
Yeah.
This just spells out how I would be compensated, because in the absence of that, I would receive no compensation.
Mhm. And the 50% of the option paid cannot exceed our commission. And 10% of the gross lease value is basically 1 month's rent. Right? And then we put the protection period automatically at 90 days. So you don't have to think about it. Right?
Good.
Retained deposits. I have a problem when people cross this out. It's almost like they don't trust us. Did you enrich the seller by getting an offer made with a big deposit? Yes. If the seller benefits and keeps that deposit, since we're the ones who gave them that money, it's fair for us to get half. Right? Because we're gonna put the house back on the market, the seller's gonna be enriched and we're gonna be enriched because we did the work. We didn't get the commission, but we got half of the deposit. Plus, it incentivizes us to get a bigger deposit. So I want you guys to be able to talk these things through instead of just agreeing to cross them out, because none of this is bad for anybody. We kept our cancellation fee at $2,000. What was our cancellation fee on the buyer broker agreement?
$500.
$500.
$500. So far less than this, right? How often do we collect a cancellation fee from a seller?
I have a few times.
A couple, maybe
Yeah.
4 or 5 a year, and we
Sure.
do
It's case by case.
1,200 listings.
Yeah.
We've had some actually offer it.
Yeah. Hey,
Because
look,
it's-
I'm sorry, I changed my mind. You guys did a lot of work. Here's your $2,000.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's it. This is the end all of the changes to the contract. And I think, let me check. I'm pretty sure I put it in the sales meeting folder. Joe, maybe put it in manager meeting. I got so many folders. I'm sorry.
We understand, we do too.
Joe Diener. Not that one. Oh, well. I'll just go back to this form. So the only thing I want you to, that's a little bit confusing is right here. You're going to do 3% plus 325 is what we charge. Because in the other listing agreement, we spelled out plus a transaction fee of 325. All right, this does not be set up as actually, we're not going to rewrite this form.
Well,
No.
there's a blank for a dollar amount after it, 3%
Yeah.
of the total purchase price plus with the
Plus.
325 there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. On
The
the buyer
buyer
broker
broker
group, right?
does
That's
not.
the, we don't want to use that plus.
Correct.
Okay, so 3% plus 325. All right, guys, my goal for us through these changes is to raise our average commission. The seller's probably not going to balk about paying you 3%. The seller may want to offer the buyer's agent whatever prevailing rate is, but how are we going to find prevailing rate? You're not. You can't just sort by MLS anymore, by price. So it's really a fair open market. You can try it at 1% seller, but you're going to rule out a lot of your buyers. And that's why we have the seller acknowledgement form that is a bad idea to not compensate a buyer's broker. So it's going to take some talking points. And go ahead.
And yeah, no, I was just going to say real quick, we're also explaining when we're sitting down with people, the market, how much percentage, and showing our value, showing that the 70% of the buyer pool out there is going to be represented by a co-broke. The more you talk about the transparency and the conversations, the more likely you are to be able to get that compensation without a lot of pushback. I've been working on listings and buyers all week and I haven't had pushback on any of it. Tired at the end of the week, you bet we are, along with everything else we're doing, but being able to be relaxed and comfortable and not preaching at people, not shouting at people, but just showing relevance to how it helps them. Just like when you're working with a customer that's a plumber, a doctor, whatever their fees are, they know what their fees are when they're going into a home to do work. You make it very relatable. You don't make it antagonistic, and people understand. They're more often than not willing to go along and go ahead and sign the agreements as they need to for transparency.
I took my dog to the vet and she had to have some tests done. And they made me sit down and they reviewed an estimate of what the blood work was going to cost, and this was going to cost, and that was going to cost, and this was going to cost. And they said, do you agree with this estimate? Yes. And they took a 75% deposit.
Yeah,
But it was a formal sit down interview explaining what the estimate was going to be.
sure.
That's kind of, if the vets are doing it,
Yeah,
we should do it too.
sure.
Cool.
Just this Wednesday from 1 to 3 o'clock in the Apollo Beach office, as well as via Zoom, we'll be focused on the listing side of the buyer brokerage agreements and how it affects our listing agents, our listings, the listing agreement, the compensation agreements. the objection handlers for a seller and how to handle those, how to manage and handle incoming calls from agents. So we could try to make this as seamless as possible. So this Wednesday's class will be focused around the listing side as a listing agent, procuring the commissions, offering the commissions, making sure we do that correctly. So please show up in the office from 1 to 3 or online from 1 to 3 via Zoom. In our webinar, we'll send an invite out. That's what this next Wednesday's class will be focused on.
Yeah, and there's quite a few forms that have changed that we want to make sure you know how to work them together. So hopefully I'll have that flow chart done by then. Also, it was Mike or Jimmy told me, we are allowed to market our brokerage listings on our brokerage website,
Yes,
which means our our Moxie websites.
We can market our compensation that we're
Right.
offering on our listings on our company website. It's actually written in the Q&A from them, spelled out very clearly. We just cannot market compensation from any other listing, what any other listing is offering.
So you could literally say, go to craigbeggins.info and you can see what all my listings are offering.
for more information, yeah.
So you can promote your own website to fellow brokerages, which makes you look pretty savvy. And they know the address. They just search 123 any street. They'll see your listing, and we have to manually enter. We haven't figured out how to do that yet. Manually enter our cooperating broker compensation. So once that gets out on the street, it's going to be a lot easier for us to tell people will know, oh, if I want there, I just have to go to their website. Right? Now, Chris, the question would be, could we market our website? We can't say what it's for. For more information, check out craigbeggins.info. I'm not talking about compensation in it.
You can't put that in the public remarks because it's an advertisement for you or
Right.
your brokerage. You
Right.
can put it in the realtor remarks. Visit this site, but
I think it's not
I
worth
just
the
want to
risk.
stay away from all
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah.
Any
Offer
type of
licenses.
offering of anything and
Yeah.
mention of anything. It's just, like I
Mhm.
said, stop trying to find workarounds for all this in MLS. Stop trying to be cute. Stop trying to be anything like that. Just follow the dang rules.
You know
And
what you could do though? Don't answer your phone, change your voicemail and say, for information on compensation, on all my listings, please go to kathleenlong.com.
I think you're talking to people like buyers or random people that call you that have no idea about anything like that. Agents aren't going to be smart enough to figure that out or be calling, and it's going to
No.
create confusion.
You're gonna get a
Just-
pow.
Do
No,
the
we
right
agreed on
thing.
this yet.
Answer your phone, provide,
Yes.
tell them we're offering compensation, send them the compensation agreement that's specifically for that listing agreement or that
Means
property.
we're not going to jail. I will not let that happen.
Bring us an offer and let's make it easy for everybody.
Yeah, we're not going to jail.
Lauren says we're literally gonna have to dial for dollars and hope a listing agent answers their phone, and of course, vice versa. And I'll say it again, I want our company to have a reputation of we're great to work with. So please do your best to answer your phone. And I know you get a lot of telemarketer calls. There's a real simple thing to do when you get those calls and you don't want them. Say hang up, and they hit the little button on your phone that says block,
Block, delete.
and they won't call you anymore. They can't get through.
See, this is a little backdoor shady kind of but it's ethical because the Florida Realtors and MLS gives you the right to do this. If you call a listing agent and ask them when their listing expires and they don't tell you, you have the right to call the seller directly. If they do not tell you when their listing expires, you have the right to call the seller and ask them when their listing expires and discuss a future listing agreement with the seller. So if you call and they don't give you that information and you want to call the seller directly because the agent isn't giving me any information and you ask the seller, oh, are you offering compensation? You're not supposed to discuss the listing, but it's a way you could get to the seller directly. Like I said, a little roundabout, but you have the right to call the seller and ask them about the terms of a listing agreement moving forward if the agent doesn't give you their expiration date of their listing. Like I said, a little, but
Yeah. Yeah. The transaction fee, guys, is $325. The MLS fee, we've always loaded that for you if you don't put it in there, because that's what we're charging the broker. But now we got to tell the seller what we're paying the buyer. I'm sorry, on the commission form, we got to say 3% minus. It's $425 is the MLS fee. We raised that about 6 months ago.
Yeah, everybody is.
The transaction fee is $325. the seller pays us. The MLS fee that we charge a cooperating broker is $4.25. I'll fill out these forms the proper way. And we'll send them out to you as a PDF that you can just look and use as a guide as you go through this. And we'll cover that stuff on Wednesday as well.
Yeah, tune into the classes, guys, because they're well worth your time, believe me. And the breakout rooms that we've been doing have been a lot of fun. It's been really good exercises. So please tune in. You won't regret it.
Yeah, we had 105 people online this morning.
Yeah, it's
At that
amazing.
point, I might have gone higher. I didn't check it all the time. Okay. That's all I got. Anything else? I think not a lot of whole other questions today. So it's not a big change, just a couple of nuances you got to know about. So once again, all your listings that are currently active, and Sammy is going through and putting these forms in your loops, by the way, which is amazing that she's going through that. We have 399 active listings. It's going to take her a lot of time to get that done. But then she's sending you an email saying she put these forms in your loop. But if you don't want to wait for that, you could do it yourself. Okay. Good. Well, it's Friday. Once again, be prepared for the weekend. Watch the weather. Be safe. And if it looks like it's going to get bad, ask our sellers to take down the panels. Or if you've got vacant listings, take them down yourself or find another way to get them done. Okay. Oh. Use your PAs. Thank you. Sam, you're a hero. What did Sammy say?
She did that all day long. Nothing else she could get to.
She only has one
Here
office
all
left.
day.
One office left. I was
Yeah.
probably a Palm Beach. They always save a Palm Beach for
God
last.
bless her.
Thank you all. Sam,
Sammy.
you're a hero. Yes, Sammy back office rocks.
They do.
Thank
And our
you. You
PAs.
did practically nothing yesterday except those. Cool. All right, guys. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.